want to talk about the state of the state a little bit, but also more importantly about Governor Moore. And it's been reported that Governor Wes Moore traveled to South Carolina to speak before the Blue Palmetto Dinner, a gathering of Democratic leaders. And there he met with advisors of former Presidents Obama and Biden. Now, Mike, far be it from me to be the skunk at the picnic. But yesterday on the Larry O'Connor show on WMAL, Congressman Andy Harris from the Eastern Shore derided the economic performance of the Moore administration, calling it a failure. And he pointed out that when Moore took office, he promised not to raise taxes. Is this going to come back to harm him? Maybe not in 26, but beyond.
Well, first of all, imagine my shock that Congressman Harris derided the Democratic governor of Maryland. I am stunned.
Well, at least you didn't call me the skunk. That's
no, but I might. But it could be Congressman Harris,
or did that on WMAL,
or that. No, I mean, I think the challenges that Maryland is facing from an economic perspective are certainly going to impact the governor's ability to be able to point to successes. I think what we decided saw yesterday that we lost 12,000 jobs as a result of the federal layoffs. I mean, these are real and are going to have a significant impact. So even if things were going well in the state, which they weren't necessarily from an economic perspective before, things like that are going to have a very significant impact. And so I think it's going to be really important for the governor to look at the policies that are out there, in particular this IT tech tax. When we start looking at that and those things are going to have an impact at a time when we need to be moving in a different direction. And I think that it will be challenging, and he's going to have to work hard to identify some economic wins. And I'm not sure where those are right now.
Well, it is amazing how popular Governor Moore is. Just yesterday on a show, I saw, oh my gosh, I can't believe the commentators, the guy from Louisiana, was talking about the Raging Cajun was talking about new leadership for the Democratic Party, and he specifically said Wes Moore is the real deal, and James Carville, thank you. My brain the hard drive finally kicked in, and I remembered the guy's name. Anyway, he was praising Governor Moore.
I think the message that he has, I think the vision that he has, I think all of those are very good. And I think he can package it in a way that not many in the Democratic Party can. I think the challenge is, and this is often the case in politics, is you have the ability to present that, and then you also have the reality of the outcomes of governance, and those two pieces need to marry up. And I think I think part of what he's doing is great. I think the other part is going to have to shore up a little bit.
So that leads to you, Mark, and the obvious question is there's an election in 26. There's obviously some weaknesses in the governor's performances, and we're going to see probably another repeat of what we saw in the last General Assembly, where they were scrambling for dollars. They were dialing for dollars. Is this going to come back to hurt them, and will Republicans be able to exploit that weakness?
Well, there's even some scuttlebutt about possible special session in the fall. I don't know, but you're right. I mean, the challenges that the state face with the budget were not fully addressed, and so there's still a strategic decision I think that the governor needs to make about Kerwin, about the blueprint, as to whether we're going to continue to go down that road of trying to fund something when the revenues aren't there, and it can only be funded by an increase in taxes and fees and everything else. And you've raised obviously 2028 and the presidency. I think that fits into that. Is he going to run as the sort of captive of the teachers union, which are frankly not as popular as they were 30, 40 years ago for a variety of reasons? Or is he going to be able to separate himself and demonstrate some independence and show that he supports education, but not necessarily beholden to simply a model that equates spending money and more money with better results?
Mike, the power of the governor has been, restricted by the General Assembly, because it used to be he presented a budget and they had very little ability to make any changes to that budget.
Right.
Now that it's wide open, they can spend almost as much money as they want. So are we going to see, is the real issue Moore's ability to control the General Assembly, or are there other factors at play?
No, I mean, I think that really is an issue. And it almost goes back to where we started our conversation on the council. When you have that many legislators that have good ideas and good intent, but don't necessarily have to be responsible for all of the outcomes, I think that creates a real challenge. And I think, up until a few years ago, the governor's position in Maryland was one of the most powerful in the country, given its statutory role, and that has been certainly cut back. And I think that has made a challenge. And I think a lot of people want to go back, as Mark was just indicating, and say, look, we're spending a lot of money on the blueprint. I don't think this is a binary choice, as is often the case. I don't think we don't have to scrap the blueprint, but we could certainly spring out those expenditures in a way that are more manageable and be able to actually also measure the outcomes of what we're seeing as a result of that, and be able to then show how we're benefiting, which then further allows you to double down on more investment later on. And I think,
Mark, I'm going to give you the last word, but I really want to focus on this question. Just recently, a poll came out, or a report came out, that showed that Maryland's federal employment is at a all-time low. How's this going to affect things for Governor Moore?
Well, this is a challenge for the state generally, which is that our economic development program, historically, not just Governor Moore, has been get more federal jobs, more federal offices in the state. We saw that with the FBI. We had an echo of this in the 90s when the Clinton administration reduced federal employment. We're certainly going to see more of this in the Trump administration, not just within the region, but also moving out of the Washington area altogether.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mike.